Okay, so I think to kick things off, what we're going to do is have you throw in the chat a response to this question related to the theme of today's session, just food licensing. So the question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how scary is food licensing for you? And we'll have you throw that in the chat as a way to get things started today. Welcome, Ryan.
Is 1 or 10 the most positive?
Is 110 the most positive?
Is 1 or 10?
Oh, that's, you know, Jane, we didn't really talk through that. How is our scale set up?
Yeah, 1 is not scary at all, and 10 is like you're catatonic with fear.
Thank you, Jane.
We've got kind of some numbers all over the board here. Some on the lower end, some on the higher end. I like this comment, Sal. After the Blazing Trails training with Jane, 3. Nice.
Yeah, it's good to know that Blazing Trails was helpful. Great.
Awesome. Well, you can continue to throw those responses in the chat. We are going to kick off with just a couple of announcements at the beginning here. Then we'll have a discussion about some of the things that you worked on last week. Then we'll pass it over to Jane for presentation today on food licensing. So the first thing that we wanted to share with you was just we've been taking in the feedback on wanting to do some bonus sessions, and we set the dates for those, basically just falling in line with the same schedule that we've had up to now, every 2 weeks. So we're going to have the first bonus session on nutrient management. That will be 90 minutes, an hour and a half, so a little bit shorter than how we have been having it. That'll be with Natalie, and that's going to be on April 18th. And then the next one will be on May 2nd. That will be sort of financial management, kind of digging deeper a little bit into the numbers piece. And then that will be with Ryan. I don't know if Eric is also going to be joining you, Ryan, on that one.
Yeah, that's our idea, Eric. We'd like to team teach that one with you if you have interest. So you're on the spot. We'll talk about it later.
Okay, I'll try not to screw it up.
And so the idea with those sessions is that they'll actually be advertised to the public as well as to this cohort. So we'll probably be sending out information through other like newsletters and different listservs that are out there to increase participation. And so just to let you know, if you are on that call and you see a bunch of unfamiliar faces, that's why. If you also know of other people who would be really interested in diving deep on that kind of information, once we've got all the links and stuff, feel free to send that to them. So we'd love to increase participation in that. Any quick questions on the bonus sessions, or does that make sense? Okay. Well, if you do have questions, don't hesitate to ask later. The last thing that I wanted to just quickly go over again was the eligibility checklist that we have created for you. And the purpose of this document is to just have a nice reference so that as you are going through this process with us, you are reminded of the things that you're supposed to be doing. And that will make you eligible for the $500 mini grant. So we've got attendance as part of that, completion of the homework assigned after the trainings, completing the one-on-one advising with the trainer, and then demonstrating progress on the tasks assigned, sort of between maybe an initial draft and then a one-on-one advising session that you might have with a trainer. So we have for the business planning session, completing that marketing mix spreadsheet. For the production session, completing that wholesale crop production planning worksheet. For the buyer connections one, I think, Brett, we probably still want to touch base to make sure this is right. But what I have right now is a sales agreement with a buyer, complete your pitch kit, and then complete the market channel and outlet directory. For the food safety, making sure that you complete the short food safety plan. And then for licensing and regulations, which we'll talk about today, completing the licensing regulations worksheet. Once we've got the assignment put together for the packaging and packing section, which will be in a couple of weeks, we'll add that to this list. So you're welcome to download this now as it is and just write in the last one. You're welcome to wait until we add that final piece. But this is just here for you as a reference and as a reminder within our shared folder. It's this document here. So it's outside of all of the rest of the sessions. When you're trying to find that document again, that's where it's located. Any quick questions about the eligibility checklist, or does that make sense to folks? Okay, I'm taking silence as a good sign. So with that, I'm gonna leave it to Jane if you want to kick us off for our discussion.
Sure. Yep. So I'm standing in for Annalisa with this first part. Annalisa and Natalie are in Kenya. They got to go on an extension trip to do some produce education in Kenya. So yay them. We're not planning to do breakouts for this first circling back about produce safety. We figure you all kind of know each other well enough now that you'll be okay with speaking up in a large group. So hopefully that's the case. And if my voice is breaking up, wave at me or something. I can kill my video if needed because my rural internet is always a little sketchy. Okay, so first of all, any particular challenges around food safety topics that came up for your farm after Annalisa's presentation and working through the things that she brought up? Anybody want to share about particular things that are challenges on your farm?
My cats. I can't get the cats to not go in the garden or the pack shed.
Okay, cats. Did you come up with any ideas for mitigation there, Eric?
Well, we could install some doors and you know, like even Dutch doors or something for the pack shed. I don't know what to do about the garden. Just chase them out, I guess.
George Sawyer suggests a pellet gun. He's always got kind of the dark side of things, I feel like here. Maybe a water pistol. That could be fun. Cat diapers. Okay. Anyone else have particular challenges that came up for your farm? No. Okay, well, does anyone want to say a lesson learned or something in particular that you got out of the homework of trying to develop your own starter plan for on-farm food safety?
Can I just jump in and say, I'm sorry, I'm at work still, but I was really appreciative of having the template because it made it so much easier to just kind of go through and see where I needed to, adjust things. So I appreciate having that template.
Thanks. If everybody's so quiet, I'm just going to start calling on people.
I'll go, Jane. I echo what Renee just said. That was good to have the template. And I also have taken a couple of training classes with Annalisa, and the thing that stuck with me is just keep the poop out of the garden, whether it's from the birds or the mice or the dog or whatever. And that was really good to put, like, frame the entire thing.
Mhm. Yep, keep the poop off the food. Great.
This is Bev. I would mention that last summer we were treated to a visit by Annalisa, and it might be a little frightening to think about at first, but you know, it was extremely helpful. And then to walk through the sort of the mini plan again was you know, brought some things to mind that our practices are really pretty good, but there's a few things we've got to be careful about. And I don't know, we talked a little bit about cats, but I'm not really sure how to keep the wild turkeys from parading through the fields either. It's something we have to live with, I guess.
Mm. Yeah, does anyone else have an idea about wild turkeys?
Dogs. But then we're back full circle and we're in a catch-22.
Yes.
Yeah,
And Bev, you got to
Yep.
watch out for your onions because those turkeys love
Oh,
fresh, tender,
Oh.
green little onions. They'll eat them all in
really.
5 minutes.
oh my. We haven't had that issue yet, but I'll be careful.
Mm.
I found the MISA publication, another MISA
Yep.
publication,
The
really
great thing
helpful.
about Annalisa is that she's not a regulator. She's an extension educator. And so if she comes out to your farm to look things over with you, she is not in a regulatory capacity at all. She may say things like, you know, this would cause you to fail a FSMA inspection, but she's going to be strictly with her educator hat on. So yeah, if you get an opportunity to have her come out, that would be great. Anyone else want to share anything? Akio, did you have a suggestion, or no, somebody did in the chat? Ngozi. Cover the manure and keep them away from plants. Yeah. Mary Lou, how about you?
Morning. I think I have a similar comment about kind of just the big picture. Like, I feel like at this point, every time I'm getting ready to start, whether it's planting or harvesting or setting up hoses, all of that, like that I'm just looking at what needs to be done and doing it and then going on. And so I think this exercise helped me think about a more, you know, just about a big picture and all of the steps and things to attend to. So I'm looking forward to that extension of efficiency as a result of this exercise.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think Annalisa would be really pleased with that comment, because it's all about building it into your mindset, right? That food safety kind of gets embedded into your brain and you see things with a different set of eyes than you did before the training. Great.
Hey.
Okay, can anybody foresee any issues around food safety and selling wholesale? Annalisa's question that she put in for this discussion was, what issues do you predict around food safety and selling wholesale? If you've been selling like at farmers markets, for instance, are you seeing anything that you have to change because of the wholesale situation.
That was Olives.
Well, Eric, I couldn't quite hear that if you were saying something.
Actually, that was Jay yelling at me, but that's all right.
Oh, okay.
Well, if no one's gonna go, this is Renee again. I'm just gonna go. Just for me, just because where I grow in Detroit is pretty small. So I'm thinking the issue I'm gonna have, since I'm scoping out some additional land, is I'm gonna have to do a whole separate plan for the new land, because I'm gonna have that, because if I'm trying to ramp up to fulfill what wholesale orders, then I'm worried about, like I said, the time, making a new plan for the additional land, getting that all set up, and then making sure that I can have all my ducks in a row for that. So that's what I'm worried about.
Okay. Yep, starting fresh in a new spot. It's a challenge and an opportunity, right?
I think it,
Akio, you have anything to? Oh, Kelly. Okay, and then let's hear from Kelly, and then Akio. And Dan asks, has anyone seen ducks walking in a row? Yes, ducklings at least I have. Kelly, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think for selling wholesale, a bigger issue for us is packaging and delivering, how we deliver the product to the wholesale customer. Our experience so far is that it's kind of all over the board, and it depends on what the customer wants, how they want it. We love to deliver produce in clean bins and dump our bin into one of their clean bins and walk out with our bin, because that way we avoid a box, which is expensive, and they avoid a box, which takes up space. And, it just is, the box situation is so wasteful. And so we've tried really hard to figure out a way around that. And, but, other customers need boxes. And anyway, there's issues with that relate to food safety.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, wholesale buyers are sometimes a little more picky than the farmer's market customer. For sure. Okay, Akio, anything that you can share about your operation?
I'm still just starting up, so I really haven't sold anything yet, but figuring out the refrigeration and other packaging and containers for selling separately from wholesale from what I've been planning, which is farmers markets and CSA so there's just a lot other stuff that I haven't been thinking about that might be different with the bulk or better record keeping for them for certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. George. Oh, you're muted. I'm not getting your audio. So maybe we'll.
Let's see. How about that?
Yeah, not getting. Oh, there we go. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's
Okay.
why you were ignoring me when I was talking to you. Okay. I'm not going to take offense anymore.
Okay.
What
Good.
can I do
Sorry.
for you? No, I'm just teasing.
Just wondering what you got out of the produce safety section, if there are any considerations on your farm that you are going to pursue now that you've had the training from Annalisa.
We are just projecting, thinking about the veggie idea. So right now we're all poultry, and we're moving to veggie. So it's kind of a clean start for us. So there was all kinds of stuff in terms of the processing, packaging that we really hadn't put together yet. So it was kind of there was a lot of good checklisting there of things that we need to. We're nowhere near a pack house or anything like that. Even at that scale, even at a small scale. So the idea of boxes and where to source those and all of that's brand new for us.
Okay. So what about the poultry? Because thinking of keeping the poop off the food, what would you do to make sure you're not tracking chicken poop into produce areas?
Oh, well, that's cleaning the boots mostly. That's something that we've been kind of struggling with, and the only thing that we're finding effective is brushes. We looked at foot baths, but they don't seem to be particularly effective unless you do brushes on either side. So still trying to figure that out a little bit.
George, if I can add, Annalisa came to my farm 10 years ago when I had birds, and her main concern was the dust from the coop area coming into the packing shed. And she was looking for like a physical barrier of a hedge or something like that to keep the dust from flying. Something you may want to think about.
Good point. And we've got a separation of the livestock from the farming area, from the garden, where the garden is going to be, just going in this year. So there are a couple of paddocks in between and a barn in between. So those are kept pretty separate.
Yep. So just again, something
that's a good point. Yeah. I wouldn't have thought of that actually.
I didn't either.
That's not why we separated them out.
Well, when she came to my farm, it kind of pissed me off because I lost the contract because of it.
Oh, oops.
This is Allison. I would second the dust part of the poultry or any manures. You think of them when they're wet as being yucky, but actually when they're dry, that dust can go everywhere, and that's a big issue I've seen and heard with our farmers that want to put their chickens in their high tunnels over the winter is the dust. So, and yeah, that's something I hadn't thought of until, I don't remember if it was Annalisa or who I heard it from, but yeah, that's a big issue and something I think about a lot now too.
Yeah, thanks, Allison and Dan. And Dan, you put in the chat that the only difference you've seen between retail and wholesale is the need to use new boxes for wholesale. We'll be talking about packaging and packing next week, but do you want to say just a little more about that, about what you do on the retail side to be able to reuse boxes?
When I have boxes that had produce in them that I go to the farmer's market with and come back, to be able to get to the next farmer's market, which sometimes is just a few hours away, is either the original produce is still in there, but usually I just have a plastic bag that the produce sits in the box, and then we'll pull that plastic bag out and then put a different box in and let that one go through a cleaning process. Excuse me, the wholesale customer is looking for basically a factory sterile box is what I found. And so you want to try to get them as new a box as you possibly can that doesn't have all crimped in corners. Now, I have several accounts that are going, here, Dan, you want to have these boxes back because I don't want you to spend all this money on them and those type of things. And they don't mind the reusing of them. But again, it's a extra diligent point about making sure that you have them clean and that they are as fresh looking as possible.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Annalisa did say if you have any additional questions to be sure to send them to her. She'll get to them when she's back from Africa, but she has been getting really good questions. And so I know she appreciates the level of engagement that people have had with the produce safety. So great.
Is there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Jane? Okay. Real quick, I wonder if anybody could comment on wild harvest and any differences that they might have experienced between kind of the food safety of traditional gardening versus wild harvest.
Anyone have experience in that area? I would suggest again, the dust could potentially be an issue, especially if the harvest is happening along road right of ways. I know there are a lot of flower people who do some ditching, they call it, of picking flowers in road right of ways. And, you know, that's for aesthetic displays and not for food. So it doesn't matter so much. But if you're in an area where there are gravel roads, for instance, and dust and things like that settling on the plants that you might be harvesting, I would think that would be a concern.
Thank you.
I would think too, I mean, this is just kind of random, but like the first thing that came to my mind is being able to be really good at identifying, is the word frass? Like basically just different types of poop, right? Of like being able to recognize like, oh, this is from this kind of animal or this isn't, you know, and like the way that the plants are like matted down in certain areas and recognizing like, oh, there's probably been animals that have been, you know, like sleeping here and that kind of stuff. But then also like maybe even watershed type concerns and just being really aware of like, how is water flowing in this particular area that I'm harvesting from? And are the surrounding areas where water is coming from, what might that be carrying with it? And how might that affect maybe the food safety of what I'm harvesting?
Yeah, thanks, Emily.
Thank
That's a
you.
really good
Yeah.
point. Frass usually refers to insect poop, which is typically not a food safety concern. It can look gross, but you know, looking gross. We just did Annalisa and I and a few other trainers just did a Food Safety Modernization Act training about a week and a half ago. And Joan Olson, who some of you may know, who's a farmer from the Litchfield area, said that looking gross isn't always the same as being hazardous, right? So some of that, like green cabbage looper eggs on cabbage, they look yucky, but they're not actually a food safety hazard. So yeah.
Jane, this is Allison. I really struggle with the insect poop thing because it looks gross, so it kind of puts the customers off. But if you try to clean it, then you're actually creating an actual food safety situation when you're involving water that could spread other pathogens. So like that's always a disconnect in my brain. Like, how can I do the best thing for my product, but still have it be safe and attractive? So yeah, thank you for touching on that.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. And I don't have good answers for that. I think that would be a good conversation to get Natalie Hoytel and Annalisa to have with each other in y'all's presence at some point.
I've asked her about it, Annalisa. I've
Okay.
talked to her about it a little bit, and there really isn't a good answer. It's just what are you comfortable with? What can you educate about? And I guess it's kind of a trial and error thing too, while keeping in mind that the pathogens, you can't see the pathogens, so you have to imagine them as you're doing your process. Just like, you know, we've been doing with the whole food safety thing. But yeah, it's I feel like acknowledging that problem is the first step to me finding a solution, or
yeah, I
being able to
remember
educate my customers.
well, I remember years and years ago, there was a organic farmer out in west of the cities who was raising sweet corn, and they would always get the corn earworms on the end of the ears, right? Because they weren't spraying a chemical to kill them. And so they would educate their customers that these were little visitors, and they actually did manage to successfully educate a lot of their customers to just flick the worms off and enjoy the rest of the year knowing that it hadn't been sprayed. But that's kind of, you probably won't get that kind of acceptance in the wholesale situation, I'm guessing.
You know, just kind of thinking about that. So if the insect poo is, I think 100% safe. I think it's like you can eat it and you'll be fine, which is gross to think about, but it, you know, whatever. If you're spreading that safe poo in the water, it's still safe poo. So I think like it would kind of be fine. It's gross to think about, but when you're cleaning those little insects off, you're often destroying, like obliterating those insects. I don't know if insect guts are edible and fine. So that's a lot of minutia. Sorry, that's where my brain goes. But yeah, anyway.
I think that the pathogenic load on an insect is
insect guts are generally, sorry, go ahead, Brett.
I was just saying that the pathogenic load in an insect is pretty low. But back to George's question, all of those waterborne plants, whether it's watercress or cattail roots or any of those you need to be super careful about if you're wild foraging, because that water can be contaminated really pretty easily. And I think when it comes to mushrooms, you will find frass, what a great euphemism, sounds like a musical instrument, but you will find that there's no way around it. And so just know that you kind of clean it off because it's not sellable if it looks like it's infested. That's more of a marketing question than a food safety one. The same with some of the other foraged things like, I don't know, cotton tree leaves or ramps or any of those things. So it's going to be up to you. And I think Emily's suggestion of taking good care of looking at the environment around it is probably your best bet.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, folks, much as I love the insect poop discussion, and I see in the chat that a few others are into it as well, we are going to move on to talk about the food regulatory things. So I am going to share my screen here for my presentation. And Emily, just help me stay on track because I think I threw in a couple of slides to denote breakpoints, but here we go. So this is based on the Blazing Trails training, but it's cut way down because the full training is up to like 249 slides now. And I think I only have about 30 or so in here. So here we go. So I saw a lot of 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s, and some higher than 9s in how scary licensing is. in the poll Emily asked for at the start. And then a few 2s and 3s from folks who have taken Blazing Trails training. So that's good to know that Blazing Trails makes it less scary, but I just want to say it doesn't have to be scary, and knowledge is power, and kind of knowing the general outlines of what you need in terms of licensing can really help demystify it and make it a lot less scary. So I am focusing primarily on the wholesale situation in today's presentation. But this is something that we start with in the regular Blazing Trails training so that you're aware that this exists. This is the State Office of the Reviser of Statutes, and all of the Minnesota state laws and administrative rules and the Constitution of the state of Minnesota. They're all available on this website. And if you dig into licensing or regulatory questions with me, I'll often send you a citation of a statute. It's really important to know that this is there. Regulatory language is kind of hard to read sometimes, but the statutes and the rules hold you accountable for the requirements that you have to follow. They also hold the regulators accountable, and it's kind of a two-way street. You're required to do some things or prevented from doing some things. The regulatory agencies can't make you do things that aren't required by law. So it's both requirement and protection. There are definitions in the statute. So there is an actual definition of food, and that includes everything used for entering into the consumption of, or used or intended for use in preparation of food or drink, or anything that humans or animals will eat or drink, except that under current law, edible cannabinoids are specifically defined as not food. Then there's this definition of sell and sale, which is really, really broad. The state of Minnesota defines sell and sale as basically anything that happens with food out in public. So private food exchanges in your private home, like around the dinner table, passing dishes at holiday meals and that kind of thing, that's not a sale. But anytime you get out into the public sphere and you're transporting food or actually taking money for it or giving it without taking money for it, packing it, holding it, processing it, storing it, exchanging it, all of those things count as a sale, whether you're taking money for it or not. Money is not a requirement for it to be a sale. So the shorthand definition, food is every ingredient involved in something humans will eat or drink, except those edible cannabinoids. And sell or sale is anytime food changes hands in any way in the public sphere. Then there are some other words that are useful to know. So approved or approved source of food means food that is legal for a food establishment to acquire and use in its business. And that's in the administrative rules. And then the end consumer is a term that I'll use a fair amount, or ultimate consumer. That's the individual who's going to eat the food themselves or serve it to their family or household or non-paying guests. So someone who's not a food business, they're just a household consumer. And then this division between wholesale and retail is something that really trips people up and gets confusing. So the retail sale is the very last point in the whole chain of how food gets from the farm gate to someone who's going to eat it. The retail is the sale to that end consumer, the person who's going to eat it themselves or serve it in their home. Everything else before that point is wholesale. And that trips people up because often you think of wholesale as being the wholesale distributors, the Cisco's, the Upper Lakes Foods, the really big distributors, but that's not the only thing that is wholesale under the law. Wholesale is any sale to an intermediary who's then going to pass that food on to an end consumer. So it includes the sales to grocery stores, restaurants, schools, food hubs, hospitals. I had someone say, well, the school, that's a retail sale if I'm selling to the school because they're not going to resell it. Well, actually they are. They're going to put that food on the trays of the school children, and the school children are the end consumers. So the landscape of food regulation includes federal law, and then most states, including Minnesota, adopt the federal law by reference into their own statutes. So federal law is kind of underpinning this, but there are state statutes, there are state rules that allow variances. And then if you're crossing state lines, then you're into interstate commerce, and that's regulated by the Food and Drug Administration or the US Department of Agriculture. And then Minnesota statutes do give the Department of Ag and the Department of Health the authority to inspect and enforce food safety laws. So that inspection authority also flows to any delegated county or city governments that have delegation authority under those agencies. And then there are sovereign nations. There are 11 federally recognized tribes that share geography with Minnesota. And in general, each tribe is different, but in general, on tribal trust land, any activities involving food there are under tribal sovereignty. They're subject to tribal law. If it's tribal owned fee land, not in trust, or privately owned land by a tribal member, activities there generally are subject to federal, state, and local laws. And the gray area is when a food product is made on trust land but sold elsewhere, and that area is very gray. Then there are local ordinances. So some locales have that delegation authority from the agencies and do their own inspection and licensing of food, but more of them don't have that. And then at the local level, they're dealing with zoning, often water and septic permitting and building codes. And with zoning, there can be conditional use permits or variances, but it's important to know that local always wins. So there can potentially be food businesses that would be legal according to state food law, but local zoning would prohibit them in the area where you want to do them, and local always wins. Does safe equal licensed? Does licensed equal safe? Not always. There are recalls every day of licensed food that was unsafe for one reason or another. And locally grown product to the farm is an approved source of food without being licensed, and it's often very safe. So this exclusion from licensing called product to the farm is in the state of Minnesota Constitution, and then it's also captured in Minnesota statute. And it says that the products of the farm or garden that you are occupying and cultivating can be sold without a license by you, the farmer. So it's an exclusion from licensing. It's like carved out of the licensing requirement. Generally, you need a license to sell food, but if it's the product of your own farm, you're carved out of that requirement. It's an exclusion, but you're not excluded from the requirement to sell only safe, non-adulterated food. So the best practices to ensure that you're selling safe, non-adulterated food are following the GAPS, Good Agricultural Practices for Produce Production, which Annalisa taught. And then for processing, Current Good Manufacturing Practices, or CGMPs, and using an adequate facility that is not your private residence and not used for personal activities. So people can sell their own product from a farm or garden that is occupied and cultivated by them with no license. It's okay if the land is rented or leased. You don't have to own it. You just have to occupy and cultivate it. There's no minimum size requirement on this, like there are for some other farm-related programs. It can be, you know, a 6 by 6 foot raised bed of herbs in your backyard. It can be a 2 foot diameter pot of herbs on your porch. The sales can be to any buyer, including food facilities, but here's the kicker. For product to the farm, no off-farm ingredients can be added, because once you add even a single grain of salt that you did not mine from your own salt mine on your own farm, that's an off-farm ingredient and it kicks you out of the product of the farm status. What about processing product of the farm? Yes, you can process fruit and vegetables and still keep them in that product of the farm column. There are 2 triggers that end that status. So one is sold by someone other than the farmer who grew it, or 2, added off-farm ingredients. So processing all by itself is not a trigger to require a license. However, depending on the complexity and the potential for introduced hazards, you might have to have a commercial grade facility, a food safety plan, a certification of training, certain other requirements. And it's really important to know that making vegetables for sale is not processing. So over the past, I'd say, couple of decades, there's been a fair amount of confusion at the regulatory agencies and among farmers over what constitutes processing. So these things, getting vegetables presentable for sale, they're not considered processing. Trimming roots, washing off field soil, removing outer leaves. You can always do those tasks with potable water, meaning water that's safe to drink. So going back to Annalisa's presentation, not surface water, right? It has to be groundwater, and it has to have 0 detectable E. coli. So processing.
Nope, she's gone again. So everybody, this blazing trails.
Internet.
Oh, there you go.
Emily, I think we skipped a spot where we were going to do a poll.
Yeah, yeah, I was just telling
if
the
you
others
want
about
to
that.
do right now.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll do the first question here.
You're supposed to protect all of them or just pick one?
This one is multiple choice. So if you want to select more than one answer, you can.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Looks like we've got about half the people have responded so far. We'll give you some more time here.
Okay, and I'm back on by phone, so
Emily or Brett or someone, if you'd be able to run the slides for me, I'll just do the audio by phone from here on out.
Yep. Okay, we'll do maybe like 10 more seconds on the poll here. All right, we're going to share the results with all of you so that you can take a look. Jane, I don't know if it's popping up on your end. Can you see the poll results, or do you want me to read those off?
I can see them. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so which of these situations are sales according to Minnesota statutes? So collecting produce from several farmers and delivering it to a school. Most of you got that one. Yep, that's a sale. Donating your surplus carrots to a food shelf. That is a sale, because remember, the definition of sell and sale does not require money exchanging hands, and it includes giving food. Passing the candied yams to grandma at a holiday dinner. That is private family. Yep, not a sale. Adding your sweet corn to your neighboring farm CSA box. Yes, that is a sale. Neighbor retail. And then offering free snacks and lemonade to visitors at your farm field day. Okay, this one looks like it tripped a few people up. That is a sale. That's a public event. Farm field days are publicly advertised events. And even though the snacks and lemonade are free, the definition of sell and sale includes giving food. So that's a sale.
All right.
Okay. So thank you. Back to.
Is this where we're at?
Yes. Yep. So processing of product to the farm includes these tasks: peeling. Oh my goodness. That technology is going bonkers. Peeling, shredding, dehydrating, slicing, wrapping, freezing, waxing, all of those things that change the nature of the product or involve cutting into it. So bagging, canning, and fermenting are starred because those may be special processes that require that additional training or certification or particular equipment. The reason why they're special processes is that they can lead to a zero oxygen environment. So vacuum sealing with bagging, for instance, creates a reduced oxygen environment, and canning definitely does, and fermenting can as well. And that is a botulism risk. So in the case of fermenting, you get the pH level down to below 4.6 as part of the fermentation process, and that inhibits botulism. But there are certain fermented things that stay above 4.6, and in that case, they would be a botulism concern.
Jane, those little oxygen inhibitor packages that you see in a lot of store-bought goods that, we as farmers can purchase them and throw them in our, spice mixes or whatever we want. Would that create a low oxygen risk?
Oxygen inhibitors or like desiccants?
Oh, you're right. It's a desiccant. Okay, never mind. Well, maybe. Well, does the desiccant take oxygen out too?
Well, it takes water out, and water contains oxygen, but no, I mean, if you've got a dry spice blend, you've got enough oxygen in there mixed in with the product that it's not going to be an issue.
Jane, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The bagging, canning, and fermenting, do those then require a license or just additional training?
Again, so the triggers for requiring a license are if you are adding an off-farm ingredient. And so if you're doing those processes without adding salt or ascorbic acid or vinegar that you purchased, you don't need a license to do them.
Jane, question, please. I have a restaurant that has asked me to vacuum seal salad greens for salad mix so it lasts longer in their fridge. Is that a licensed item?
Not necessarily. Yeah, because if it's just vegetables, typically that's not considered a risk. It's when you do have some other ingredients added. But, you know, I can talk with you more about that later and look up the specific parameters of that. I guess I'm a little surprised that they would want vacuum sealed like lettuce. That seems like it would damage the lettuce, but yeah, I can help you find the specific parameters on when it would be considered a risk.
Thank you, Jane. We'll have a lot of conversations.
Sure. Okay, onward. All right, so mixed ingredient products can be product to the farm as long as every single ingredient is produced by you on your farm or garden. So Brett and I have been doing these trainings for a long time, and we've encountered people who want to kind of make a game out of it and say, okay, how many of the ingredients could I produce on my own farm? Could I do a salsa? I could grow tomatoes and peppers and cilantro, and I could put up a greenhouse and grow my own lemons and squeeze the juice for lemon juice. And yeah, you can do all those things. What about salt? Again, if you don't have your own salt mine on your own farm and you can't produce your own salt, so you're buying that, that kicks you out of product to the farm. But, you know, then it's fine. Then if you can't produce every ingredient yourself, you source the ingredients from somewhere else and get a license. Next slide. Okay, any more questions about product to the farm? And I think at this point, Emily has another quiz. Thank you. Yeah, it turned into Grand Central Station here where I'm at because a feed delivery came and my dog is barking at the feed truck. And so if you're hearing background noise, yeah, it got really noisy here.
All right, folks should be able to see the results now.
Okay, yep, I see them. Great, so it looks like you guys are winners. Yep, culinary herbs you grew in pots on your porch, that is product to the farm. Correct. Boxes of cabbage you grew and delivered to a school, yes. Shredded coleslaw mix made from all things you grew, yes. Shredded coleslaw mix made from partially things you grew and partially things you sourced from someone else, not product to the farm. Very good, because you're getting product from someone else other than you. And then salsa made from almost everything you grew, but with salt added that you bought. That is not product of the farm because of the salt. All right, anybody have other questions about product to the farm before we move on here? Okay, let's move along.
I think what I have in my notes, and I'm not sure if this is it's still the same, if we wanted to do the breakouts about challenges in food licensing and regulation.
Oh, yeah.
Slides.
Yep. No, let's go ahead and do the breakout. So Yeah, I just want to have us split up into rooms and share about what your experiences have been. If you have attempted licensing and gotten into some difficulties with it, or if you have had a good experience, or if you've encountered food regulations in some other way than licensing, what that was like. I'd just like to get a feel for what people's experiences have been.
And we've got about like 25 minutes before we take a break. How much time would you like folks to have together, and then we could come back?
Let's do 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay. In theory, this should work, that I have you all pre-assigned and that it should pop up and you can join your assigned room. And I will reassign you, Jane, because it looks like that one popped out. I think we'll put you in room 2. Okay, and Russell, we'll also put you in room 2. And then Stephen will put you in room 1. Okay, let me know if you have any issues joining the breakout rooms.
All right, we're coming back.
I think that's everyone.
Okay, great. So in my group, we had a couple questions come up about the on-farm food service, and I wasn't going to talk about that because it's not wholesale, but I'll just maybe talk about it briefly because it did come up. So for on-farm food service, there is an exemption, the food stand exemption, that would allow you to serve snacks and lemonade at a field day. It's considered a sale, but you can get this exemption from licensing for up to $1,000 worth of product and fewer than 10 days of operation per year. Qualify for that because of too much food or giving away more than $1,000 worth of value of food, then you would need a special event food stand license, which is, well, the price can vary depending on where you are in the state, but it's under $100 and does not require you to be a certified food protection manager to do that kind of food stand. So anybody else have particular things that came up in their breakout discussions?
Yeah, Eric had a good point that that explaining what you're doing and coming to a yes with your inspector if you're doing something a little bit odd, like his farm stand, that knowing what the law is and working with whoever is inspecting you to get to a yes is better than throwing a fit and not doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. That's part of why we did the blazing trails in the first place, because we were hearing of too many people just throwing up their hands and saying, I guess I can't do it. And that is not that's not the end point we want people to get to.
And then we also had a couple things on commercial kitchens, and knowing that kitchens don't get licensed, they get inspected, and that that canning tomatoes usually requires salt to be included. That could be done under cottage, but not for wholesale. We need to keep those very separate, but that those tomatoes could be processed. They could be blanched and de-skinned and put in big bags and frozen whole and sold for the purposes of this wholesale readiness. If they've done the trainings, and I told them to reach out to you, Jane, for the specific ones if anybody is interested in canning or low oxygen packaging.
Yep. Yeah, there are always those details. And the thing about regulations is that you change one detail of your operation and you can get kicked into a completely different licensing category. So we've seen people get into sticky situations when they've gotten a license to do a thing, and then they change the thing that they're doing, and their license isn't the right one anymore. Anyone else have particular things come up?
We don't have anything particular, but one thing we all kind of agreed on is this issue about getting questions answered and correctly. It's just sort of the frustration of figuring out, navigating it, Jane. But I think Allison had this great point where she's like, secret sauce is identify the right person. If you find the right inspector and you're talking to the right person about the right license and you're persistent, that's really, game over. It's a lot of times the challenge that we heard about was, I'm not your right person to talk to, or you should talk to this person, or how about this person, or how about that person? And that's part of the frustration. If you get to the right person, and that's really the name of the game.
Yep, exactly right. Yeah, we call it the ping pong game of just getting ping ponged between regulators. And the thing about a lot of these smaller scale sustainable ag and local food connected things is that people are really innovative, and their business model straddles several categories potentially. And when you're in that situation of straddling between Department of Ag things and Department of Health things, that can get you in a situation where you're more likely to hit the ping pong machine, because it isn't clear to the regulators what side you should be on.
I got a question, just kind of in general, all this food safety stuff and what have you, it all relates back to biology and, bad bacteria, bad organisms versus good type of thing. So all these good practices relate to how we keep those bad organisms out type of thing. Is there alternative, not that many of us would do that, but are there alternative means to that, such as biological testing or assays, or what food companies would do? Or are the processes the law and not the testing? Or is there both that could be done? Like, E. coli, if you test for like your water, you test your water. I had this come up once and I had to argue with someone. I tested it for coliform, it came back negative. They said, well, you didn't test it for E. coli. I said, and my wife has got background in this. She said, well, if it doesn't have coliform, it doesn't have E. coli, because E. coli is a form of coliform. But they argued that, well, your test didn't show E. coli testing, so you didn't do it right. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. There's no coliform present, so there's no E. coli present. So that type of reasoning as far as testing, is there, you can show negative results for these types of organisms, and then you don't really have to, most of us are going to follow the processes because they're easier than the testing, but I'm just curious about that aspect of it.
Yeah. Yep. The processes are typically the thing, not the testing itself. If you get into processing, like canning tomatoes, like Brett was talking about, then you would be working with a process authority to review your process and do some testing on product and verify that your process is producing a safe product. But then, you may have some routine testing just to verify that your process is working, but in general, you follow the process. Yep, and that's the case for the produce safety rule too. You follow the process, and you're correct about the water testing. If it shows 0 total coliform,
then there's no E. coli either, because E. coli is a subset of total coliform. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask Emily to pull the slides back up. We've got just a couple more to go through about licensing, and then we'll take a break. And then we'll come back and talk about how to get a license. So, licensed local food, and you all did really well on the quiz, so you know this, but that includes products sold by someone other than the farmer who grew it. So the one that tends to surprise people is this community supported agriculture situation in which one farm is filling out the variety in their box by purchasing from other farms. That is a license situation, because then the farmer with the CSA is not selling only product to their own farm, right? They're selling product from other people's farms, and that's a trigger to require a license. So other types of handling where there's a third party, not the farmer themselves doing the sale. So the farmers market-based hubs, they need to be licensed, and they are. Other types of food hubs or co-ops, they need to be licensed as food handlers. Brokers or distributors, they need to be licensed as food handlers. Farmers or others who are doing distribution type activities on a volunteer basis. Remember that the definition of sell and sale does not require money to exchange hands. So like a volunteer distributor who's saying, okay, I will collect up product from half a dozen farmers and get it to the school. That farmer doing the collecting and distribution needs to have a license for that activity, needs a food handler license. Okay, next slide. All right, and then the other trigger is the addition of off-farm ingredients. So making any of these products where you're purchasing vinegar or salt or sugar or pectin or flavorings, multi-ingredient products where you may be purchasing some breads or other ingredients that go into things where you can't grow every single thing yourself. You know, that's fine. You can make these products. You just need to get a license in order to do it. Or cottage food, but we're not talking about cottage food today because, like Brett brought up, cottage food has to be sold to the end consumer only. You cannot do wholesaling of cottage food. So if you want to be wholesaling these products to a grocery store, restaurant, school, etc., you must be licensed to make them. Next slide. Okay, and then just a little bit about cross-border sales. So raw whole produce, that's an agricultural commodity, and that can cross state borders. Licensed food that is processed in some way, that can cross state borders if your food business is registered with the Food and Drug Administration as a food facility, and that is a registration with FDA. There's no cost to it. And there are also a number of categories where you can be exempt from stringent requirements because of being small scale or offering a limited product line and having, you know, few employees. But there is a registration requirement for crossing borders. Okay, we already did that breakout, and then the next topic is going to be, how do I get a license?
but it's 10:30, so we're going to take a 5-minute break and come back for that part.
All right, we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Thanks.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now and be back to doing that. Okay, how do I get a license? So the first step to talk about in how to get a license is jurisdiction. And I touched on that after the breakout about how if you're doing something really innovative and kind of straddling two worlds between the things regulated by ag and the things regulated by health, it can get confusing for inspectors as well as you. So in Minnesota, we have two separate state level agencies, Department of Ag and Department of Health, that each have responsibility for part of the food system. So the Department of Ag handles everything that is product sales, and Department of Health handles everything that is food and beverage service. Almost. I mean, there's always a goofy exception here and there, but basically, if it's being served on a plate or a little cardboard boat with a napkin and a fork or a spork or whatever, that's food and beverage service, and it's under Department of Health. And everything else is under ag. So ag covers food processing and manufacturing. So processing of raw ingredients into packaged foods such as pickles, sauerkraut, jam, frozen corn, apple pies, all of those things you might consider making with produce that you grow. Ag covers product sales, so the handling of food, the buying and reselling of packaged food or bakery products, bulk food, whole raw fruits and veggies. So wholesale distributors are food handlers, grocery stores are food handlers, farmers who are collecting product from multiple other farmers and distributing it are food handlers. Farmers' sales of their own farm products, even though they're excluded from licensing as product of the farm, they're still under the regulatory jurisdiction of the Department of Agriculture. And then ag also covers all the other food things that don't come under the Department of Health. So meat slaughter and processing, dairy production and processing, for example. And then the Department of Health has food and beverage service, so preparing and serving food to individuals. Okay, then there's this 51% rule that goes by physical location, so where food activities are happening. And the agreement between Department of Ag and Department of Health is that at each physical location, for each legal entity operating at that location, there's going to be one food license. No matter how many different kinds of food activities you're doing, the one that is the majority of your annual sales or your annual volume determines what your license is. But you can still do multiple kinds of activities under that one license. The per legal entity thing is important because there are things like shared use kitchens, right? And so in a shared use kitchen, it's one location, but there might be, 5 or 6 different entities coming in on different days of the week to use that kitchen. And each of those legal entities needs their own license to operate at that place. And if you're a farmer or a food maker operating at multiple locations, you may need multiple licenses because licenses are tied to physical location. So I've seen this in a number of situations where, for instance, there's a jam and jelly maker who is renting a kitchen to make the jam and jelly. So she needs a license at that
kitchen location. And then she is storing the jam and jelly at a different location, and she needs a license at that location for the storage. And then she is selling the product at farmers markets or community events. And she needs a retail mobile license then for that moving around part of the sales at different farmers markets and events. So she has 3 separate licenses. And that is a kind of frustrating aspect of how the law is not set up to really work well for our small scale food processors. But at least at the present time, that is what it is. So the majority of dollar sales by an entity at a location determines the license type. And it's also important to know that applies to licenses. So just the name of the license on the little piece of paper you get that says you have the license. The 51% rule applies to that, but not facilities and not processes. So for instance, my friend with the 3 licenses has the retail mobile license for taking the jars of jam and jelly around to sell them at different places. That if things were configured differently for her, where her locations were, she might be able to make her product with that license, but she would still have to, yeah, she really couldn't because that one's a mobile. But, you know, if you're making a product under a food manufacturing license, and then you also want to open a cafe, restaurant type of thing in the same building, you're going to need restaurant kitchen grade facilities for that cafe portion. You're not going to be able to use your food manufacturing equipment that isn't set up for food and beverage service. So,
Question, please.
Yep.
The example you're using where you have one person who makes it at the location. And anyway, this person who needs the retail mobile handling license, she's selling her own product?
That's right, with off-farm ingredients added, jam and jelly. So she's adding sugar, she's adding pectin. You know, she's making it under a license because she also does sales on Etsy, which is a shipping situation, which isn't allowed under cottage food. So she has to have a license for doing that.
Just my understanding of retail mobile handling license is when you're selling somebody else's product.
It can also be your own product if it's not your own product to the farm. So for instance, I'm a livestock farmer, and I raise pigs and I sell pork products. I sell ham, bacon, and sausage. Those things include ingredients I did not raise on my farm. Therefore, I don't qualify for product to the farm for those products. And so I need to have a retail mobile food handler license to be able to sell those products at farmers markets. Yep. So that's where it's really important to get clear on that dividing line between product to the farm and not product to the farm, because, you know, my sausage is 99.5% product to the farm, and the other 0.5% is seasonings added by the butcher, but that's not 100% product to the farm, so I need a license. You can also handle other people's product with that license. You know, it's flexible in that way, where it covers things that are not product to the farm. So your own product that's mostly but not 100% product to the farm, or products from other people, could both be under that license. So here are the Department of Ag license types. Retail food handler. So that is the license for a building where you are either handling products, selling it like a grocery store, or making and selling it, like my friend who sells jam and jelly on Etsy. Her retail food handler license allows her to make the product and sell it on Etsy. The retail mobile is for moving around. There are several flavors of that. Yeah, depending on what exactly you're doing. The one that farmers market vendors use a lot is called retail food vehicle portable structure, or CART. And that one is a good one to use if you are all you're doing is transporting packaged product, because it has some pretty low bar for the types of equipment that you need in there. Then the wholesale food handler would be like the retail food handler one, except for only handling product. That one doesn't cover processing, but it allows you to, take food, take packaged food and sell it to any buyer. So if you're primarily, like if you are buying other people's product, other people's produce and processing it, and then selling it to a hub, for instance, you could potentially have that wholesale food handler license if your processing portion of it is less than half, because the wholesale food processor license is for the processing part of it. But again, there's that 51% rule. I know it gets really confusing. It's like you have to have the right equipment and facility for what you're doing. But then if your processing activity is more than half of the annual value, you'd get that processor manufacturer license. If it's less, you'd get probably the wholesale food handler license if you're doing those sales to schools, grocery stores, etc. And again, this is for things that are not product of your farm, right? If it's 100% product of your farm, you don't need these licenses. You're looking at these licenses if you're getting into adding ingredients or sourcing some product from other farmers. So here are the license fees. The retail ones are $77 a year. The wholesale food handler is $57, and then the food processor is $169 a year. And these are the lowest rates. And then there are thresholds for increasing the fees as your dollar sales increase. So the threshold on the retail ones is up to $50,000 a year. The threshold on the wholesale food handler is up to $25,000 a year. And then you would kick into a higher fee category.
What are the facilities requirements for this? If we're working off farm in our own, residential kitchen.
If you're working in your own residential kitchen, you cannot get a license to operate there. That would be cottage food, right? Because remember, way back to the start of this presentation, I said if you're doing product to the farm, you're required to ensure that the food is safe and not adulterated, which means following current good manufacturing practices, which means not doing it in a private residence kitchen. The only time you can do food in your private home kitchen is if it's cottage food. And in that case, you cannot do wholesale sales of cottage food. It has to be only to that end consumer. So if you're looking at needing to get a license, you need to find a commercial grade kitchen space to work in. And there's also a lot of confusion around terminology with commercial kitchens. Remember what Brett said, that kitchens get inspections, people get licenses. So in the city of Minneapolis and a couple other large cities, they have a category called a licensed kitchen. But once you're out of those cities, a licensed kitchen is not a thing. There are just kitchens.
and you can get licensed to operate in a kitchen that is commercial grade for the activity you're doing, which doesn't have to be a super high bar. If what you're doing is processing your own product to the farm, like shredding cabbage or peeling and cutting carrots, that's a relatively low risk activity. You could most likely do it in a community center kitchen or a township hall kitchen or potentially a church kitchen if the church had a pretty decent setup. So there are lots of potential kitchen spaces in communities that you could use, but it can't be your private residence kitchen if you want to get a license. Okay, any other questions on that?
How about in a packing shed, Jane, this private residence versus a business structure? Yep, it's still on your property and all that, and you're just taking product to the farm and doing basic processing.
Yeah, that can potentially work, and there are some farmers doing that. Partition off a corner of the packing shed, install some stainless steel sinks and tables to work on, for instance. So current good manufacturing practices require that there be a floor, walls, and ceiling of materials that are smooth, cleanable, durable, and non-porous. So no shag carpeting, no unfinished wood. But, you know, there are people who are doing this and they're using like the FRP wallboard. That's acceptable. A finished cement floor is often acceptable for that kind of basic processing. So yeah, that is a potential avenue.
Can I jump in for a second, Jane? So once you go to that level, you want to really talk with your inspector and talk about like all the things you're going to do, because there might become a certain point where you design a space to do one thing and then you expand to another thing, and that space will no longer qualify. And some things to be careful of are like drains, like how many sinks you can have on a drain and where that goes. So getting that plan review is going to be super, super important if anybody here is thinking about going down that line.
Yeah, exactly. And formal plan review is only a thing for the retail licenses. There's a plan review process where you fill out an application and pay a fee. That's a one-time cost for the retail licenses. The wholesale license doesn't have that formal plan review process with a fee attached, but Brett is absolutely correct that it's a good idea to initiate that discussion with the inspector, because the inspector will review your facility even though there's not that written application and fee attached. The inspector is still going to review that facility. And so if you're looking at wholesale food processing, you want a relationship with the inspector early. Yeah.
Jane, this is Russ. I got a question. Just you already stated it. I just want to be clear. Like if I had, like you had that example earlier, that's pretty common that folks get that wrong. The CSA or other models like that, where you're getting other products from other farms and selling it for them.
Mm-hmm.
You'd either need the retail or the wholesale food handler's license, right? Depending on which sales outlet you're selling to. And if you sold both retail and wholesale of other farms products, you'd need both. Is that correct?
No, no, because then you'd be under that 51% rule, and whichever was the majority of your sales would be your license. So if you were collecting other farmers' produce and selling it like selling it in CSA boxes to end consumers, that'd be retail, and also selling some of it to grocery stores and restaurants, which would be wholesale. Whichever was the majority of your sales would be your license. So if it's majority CSA customers, it'd be a retail license, but you could still sell to grocery stores and restaurants. If majority of your sales were wholesale to other food businesses, your license would be a wholesale food handler, but you could still do some retail sales.
And then you would also require that plan review fee, is what it sounds like, right?
Well, okay, so on this slide, it says, except for that retail food vehicle portable structure or cart license, that's a retail license that does not have plan review attached to it. So this is a really useful license for a lot of farmers because it allows you to do those kind of CSA types of things, or farmers market sales, or just transporting of product from one place to another, setting up a farmers market stand. It's a pretty flexible license, and it does not require you to have that plan review. And it also doesn't require you to have a lot of the retail food code requirements for a lot of stainless steel and tile floors and all of those kind of higher level restaurant grade requirements. So, for example, Eric Heimark has this license for his on-farm store, which is in a 1950s era RV that they revamped. Technically, it's a mobile unit. They did drive it from where they bought it to their farm, and they're allowed to basically have an on-farm retail store in that mobile unit under this license.
Okay, so if you have a permanent farm stand, then you need a plan review. Is that what it means?
Right. If you have a, if you're building a, yeah, if you're building a brick and mortar facility, if you have a permanent building, then you come under the retail food code and this plan review. And that also carries with it requirements for approved source of water, approved septic system, having a bathroom installed. It carries with it a lot of other requirements. So to the extent that you can use this retail food vehicle portable structure or cart license, it saves a number of headaches. Doesn't work for everyone's situation, but it can work for a lot of them.
And then the food handler's license, wholesaler retail, is that a separate training besides a license, or is it just an application and an inspection? Or I missed that part, or I maybe misunderstood it. Just to get that license, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Just to get the which license?
Either the wholesale food handler or the retail food handler. Like, is it just a separate class certification and then you apply for the license, or is it you just apply for the license, apply for it?
Yeah, you just, it's not actually even an application for the license. What you do is make direct contact with an inspector, and then they work with you. So here's the first step for getting started with Department of Ag licensing is the food licensing liaison. So that person is a point person within the Department of Agriculture who takes in inquiries about licensing and directs you to the right inspector. So you start with the food licensing liaison. She gets you connected with the right inspector, whether that's a wholesale inspector or a retail inspector, and they have different territories within the state. So depending on your location and what you're doing, she'll get you connected with the right person. Then you make contact with that inspector, explain what it is you're going to be doing, then if it's a retail license that requires plan review, you'll fill out the plan review application and have that sent through the plan review unit at MDA, which is not the same person as your inspector. But if you're not in that situation, if you're wholesale or the retail mobile, the retail food handler, retail food vehicle portable structure or cart, then you'll be working just with that inspector. And they will, you know, look at your facility, say you need to change this, this, and this, or if you're having them look at a plan in advance, they'll say, don't do that thing, do this instead. They'll look at your traceability system if you are handling product. So you need to be able to trace one step back to your suppliers and one step forward to your buyers. So basically some kind of invoicing system, whether that's an online platform like the hubs are using or a spreadsheet based system. They'll have a discussion with you about food safety requirements, and they may ask you about some of your protocols. So, you know, your employee hygiene protocols, for instance, how you make sure that you don't have ill employees working, people with gastrointestinal diseases. How are you going to make sure that they're staying home, not working with food? So those kind of protocol type things. And then when the inspector is satisfied with your system and your facility, they issue you the license.
How long would that normally take? I know it's going to vary, but a minimum, maximum normally that you'd expect.
You need to plan on 30 days. Yeah, you need to plan some time in advance. And if you're subject to plan review, you probably better figure an additional 30 days. And sometimes it can go more quickly. It depends on whether you have the right kind of ducks that'll walk in a row, right? But yeah, the more that you can put together in advance, like of your plan, what your equipment and facility is going to look like, how you're going to do that traceability step, how you're going to ensure food safety, if you're doing any special processes like that reduced oxygen packaging, you know, do you have the correct equipment and training for that? The more of that you can get pulled together ahead of time, the smoother the licensing is going to go. But you do need to plan on some time. Okay, are we ready to try out a couple of licensing scenarios here? I'm going to share the example. Okay, so I put together a licensing and regulations worksheet. And what I want you all to do in the breakout room is to work through this for a few scenarios. And Emily, do you have those scenarios handy?
I sure do. Do you want me to just copy those and throw them into the chat?
Yep, that'd be great. And then we'll need to have them in the chat in the breakout rooms too. So if people want to copy them out of chat and have them handy. But this is a worksheet set up to start you thinking about that traceability piece of one step back, one step forward. So the center column here is what you do. It's what you do or cause to have done to your products. So any processing. Then the left-hand side, your one step back, is who are your suppliers. So if it's all product of your farm, then your supplier is your field, right? And you may have a field numbering system. So that would be your one step back. But if you're getting from other farmers, or if you're purchasing ingredients, then you list that under your suppliers. And then who are your customers? That's your one step forward on your right-hand side. So if you're selling to end consumers through a CSA, that's one of your steps forward. If you're selling to a grocery store, you know, that's a customer. That's one of your steps forward. And listing that out will help parse out whether you're primarily retail or primarily wholesale. And when you get to doing this on your own for your own farm, you know, you can game it out. Even if you don't have wholesale sales yet, here's what you would be doing when you get those. So there's that worksheet. And then the other tool to use is this produce licensing flowchart, which I have in the folder, but I'll just quick throw the link to it in the chat as well. So this goes through the different, this is just for produce. There'd be like a whole nother one for meat, a whole nother one for poultry, a whole nother one for baked goods, but this is just for produce. So this is the tool to use as you're going through those scenarios and figuring out what the likely license is. It is a little bit complex because licensing is complex, but give these scenarios a try.
You want us to have that first document too, Jane, in our groups, or we'll just work through the flow chart?
Yeah, so Emily's got the scenarios in the in the chat, and you can use that worksheet if you want, or you can just, you know, think about that one step back, one step forward concept and use the flow chart, whatever's more comfortable for you.
Jane, is there a PDF that you can send or link us to of the chart, of the flow chart? Or is there a way to print this from the Google sheet?
Yeah, are you not able to access it in the Google sheet?
I can see it, but going back and forth between the chat for the question and the flow chart and the video is complicated.
Mm-hmm. It is in the Drive folder. I could email out the Excel version too, except that I'm not sure I can put my hands on all of your email addresses right this minute. So you should be able to download it. I don't know. Emily, what do you think? Should I try to get the Excel version emailed out to people?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so when you open it in the Excel format or the Google Sheets, if you go up to the File menu and then you scroll down to the part where it says Download, you can download it as an Excel or as a PDF. I would recommend if you do the PDF, change the orientation to landscape, or else it's gonna turn out really funky. I was just trying to do that on my end to see what it looked like. But that would be one way to do that. And then we'll make sure that those prompts get thrown into the chat as well. Once we split everybody up into the breakout rooms, that way the facilitators also have that information. Does that help at all? Another thing too, pro tip, if you're not familiar with like organizing windows on your screen, if you're operating from a PC, you should be able to push the Windows button and then either the left or right arrow. It will take one of your windows and move it to one side of your screen. And then you can select the other window. And then basically you'll have a split screen where you're looking at two things at once. If you are on a Mac, you click on the green button up in the upper left-hand corner, hold that down, and then you can do the same thing where you pick a window to go to one side of the screen and then you can put the other one there. That way you can look at two things at once.
I believe that's as clear as foggy days.
You know what? I just got into the spreadsheet where we have all your email addresses. So I am going to send an Excel version to your emails right now. And if you don't have Excel, then I'm a little stumped.
We could also have facilitators, if you want to share your screen, you should all have co-hosting abilities at this point. You can do that too, if that's helpful. Okay, so while Jane is working on that, are there any other maybe clarification questions about what we're going to do in the breakout rooms? Are people kind of understanding where we're going with this?
Yeah, so the idea is to figure out what license or exclusion from licensing would apply to each of the scenarios. Okay, and I just hit send. So you should get an Excel version of the flow chart in your email momentarily.
Okay, so I realize kind of where we're at on time. I'm thinking maybe we'll keep it a little bit shorter than we had originally planned for this. Maybe we should be able to do like 7 minutes. So that'd be okay. And then we'll just see how far people get in that time, and then we can bring everyone back together.
Sure.
Okay.
SpeakoWise licensing Oracle.
Okay, first of all, I got to figure out my technology. There we go. All right, how did folks do?
Well, my breakout room was full of geniuses, and they nailed all of them. And we came up with some other ideas for commercial kitchen rental options, like bars don't open until later in the morning. And if you're a morning person, that might be a great spot. And the same with restaurants, closing. And if you like working at night, maybe midnight at the restaurant is a good place to look. So
Yeah, great ideas. Yep, if you leave with one takeaway from this, it's that there are a lot of potential kitchen spaces out there that you could use. You do not have to drive to Minneapolis to get what they call a licensed kitchen. Okay, how did the other groups do? My group was also geniuses. They got it like Akio got it intuitively, and then I made them go back and walk through the actual flow chart to make sure that that worked and came up with the same answer. So great job. How about the other groups?
Yeah, we got all right answers, I think. Walking through the flow charts. You can confirm that we have the right answers. That'd be good.
Okay, what were the right answers then that you guys came up with?
Well, God, now my memory has to be work. Nothing necessary for the first one. We're just on strawberries. That's a piece of cake.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And the second one, we landed on wholesale food handler license.
Also correct. Very
okay, good. And then the last one is whatever's blue in the bottom right, wholesale processors license. Damn, somebody looking at this, tell me.
That's right. Wholesale food processor license for
okay.
making the strawberry jam to sell to restaurants. Very good. Hey, you guys got it all. The thing that gets so confusing though is that 51% rule, because if you were going to make strawberry jam and sell some of it to a restaurant, but most of it to end consumers that were buying it on Etsy, you'd be able to do it under the retail license.
Question about that. When you look at sales from today forward and pick a number, and okay, I'm 51% here, but then as your business grows, it shifts to another thing. How does that adjust the license that you need?
Yeah, it does. And that's kind of what Brett was saying about trying to think ahead about what kind of facility you need if you're pouring money into building something.
if you, if you're building something and you think that you're looking towards expanding and getting into a different license category, you know, you might be better off to build to the higher standards at the outset when you have financing to do it. So that's something to try to think through and anticipate if you can. But if your facility is fine and you just need to change your license type, then you go back to the licensing liaison at the Department of Ag and say, you know, I need to change the type of license I have, and it'll be a different inspector then probably that she'll set you up with.
And then the last question about this liaison, during COVID years, working with that liaison was about as easy as trying to stop the wind. Has things improved?
Well, I'm not sure which person you were working with. There was an individual who retired who was difficult, and the new person is really good at her job. Her name is Jody Burke. Not you know, I mean, she can still make mistakes. All of us can still make mistakes, but she's good at what she does. So
thank you. I wasn't criticizing whether they were mistakes or not. It's just like I seemed to get nowhere. I was always put in a circle and came back to the beginning. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that would be an off Zoom conversation to have with you about what was going on there. Okay, so a couple more things I'm going to show you. These are in your folder for your homework, but I'm going to show you them on screen. So there are 3 fact sheets, and part of what I want you to do for your homework is to download these, print them off, and highlight certain segments of them and add them to your pitch kit that Brett is having you put together. Because the thing about licensing and having 2 different agencies within the state of Minnesota that are responsible for things is that that things can get confused, right? Because Department of Ag handles all the product side, but the food and beverage service people are often the ones that are using that product. And if the health inspectors on the health side don't recognize the legality of the ag side products coming into their kitchens, then you can lose out on sales, right? And it's been a problem historically. It's getting better, but I just want you all to be aware that that can be an issue. And having these fact sheets in your back pocket, in your pitch kit, could really help keep a door from getting slammed shut. So this one is from the Department of Health. It's called Approved Sources for Food Products. And again, it's in your folder for session 5, so you can find it and download it. This paragraph here, highlight that, where it says a food establishment may buy or accept produce directly from a grower. The grower can produce food to sell without a food license. The first sentence in this fact sheet says purchase food from commercial suppliers under regulatory control. A lot of people read that first sentence and it's a hard stop for them. They're like, oh, I cannot buy from a farmer, because that wording doesn't imply farmer, right? So print it off, highlight this paragraph, and have it with you when you go visit buyers. Then there's another one. It's the selling or serving locally grown produce in food facilities. This one is Department of Ag. And highlight this introductory thing that says food facilities, and then it lists off a bunch of them, can legally buy or accepted donated produce from a farmer's market or directly from a farmer. Okay.
And that has Department of Ag branding on it. The other one has Department of Health. Here it defines what food facilities are. So print this one off and also have this one in your back pocket. And then there's this Selling Minnesota Produce Guide that was created by MISA and the Minnesota Farmers Market Association. So it's not an official agency publication, but I wrote it. I worked with Department of Ag and Department of Health people on it. It matches their standards, but it's written for the farmer side. So this one is for you guys. This one kind of goes through all the details of licensing, definitions, says that you're an approved source. You might want to highlight this statute and have this one with you as well, so you can look up the actual statute and show it to someone who might want to buy from you. But this one goes through a lot of things, including cottage food. This one is like all the things farmers can do with their produce. And the other two are for buyers, saying what buyers can legally buy. So I want you all to have those printed out in your packet or your binder or whatever it is you're using to organize your materials. Okay, and then your homework is to take that licensing worksheet that's in your folder and do that mapping out of your enterprises, whether you have one or several. There are 3 different pages of that little table in the document, so you can copy and paste more of them if you need it. But that table where you say in the center column what you do to the product, the left-hand column is where you're getting it from, the right-hand column is where it's going to, and then take that and work through with that licensing flow chart what license you would need for each of your enterprises or proposed enterprises. There's a space at the top to write down what license you would need, and that's your homework, just to map out your enterprises, use that flow chart, figure out what license you would need, and upload that in the form that Emily created.
And I'll make sure that that description makes its way into the form as well. I don't think we have that there yet, but I'll make sure that it does. That way it's clear you are reminded what to do for that.
Great, thanks, Emily. Okay, it's 11:32. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. A lot of information again, but you guys are doing great.
Yeah, thank you. I just have maybe one more thing and then we'll let you go. For those of you who have the flexibility to stick on, just a quick reminder, that soil testing grant link that we sent out, I'll throw this into the chat. They actually have already had over 100 requests, but you can be added to their waiting list if you'd like. So you can still fill that out. And then there's also the produce safety mini grant. That one is due on the 25th. So in 4 days, if you haven't filled that out yet and you want to, or if you need some assistance, let us know. We'll connect you with someone who can help you fill it out. But other than that, thank you. We'll see you in a couple of weeks and we'll focus on packaging and packing with Ryan.
Okay.
Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Emily, I've got a quick question about that mini grant.
Yeah.
I received the grant last year and I didn't use the full 800, but would I qualify again? Or like, can I apply for it again? Is there a chance I would get it, or is that a waste of my time?
Let's see. I'm going to pull up the page here and see if there's anything on eligibility that would count you against.
I can maybe help with that. I just asked that question myself, and they said if I applied last year and received it, I could apply again this year.
Awesome. Thank you, Gina, for sharing that. Did anyone else have questions on that?
Great.
Okay.
Someone has an
I'm
answer.
struggling to upload my proof of purchase, so that's the only problem I'm having with it.
Got it.
So just a quick this is Russ, just a quick comment, not to try to make any controversy, but I do have a question on a few things just related to why some of the like if you add salt or pectin to something, why that triggers a different license when really there's not a food safety concern. It just seems like that's not really common sense why that would trigger a different type of license. I can see some other things where processing where that would trigger a food safety where it could be a higher risk, but I don't know. That's just a question I've got.
Ryan, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Good point, Russ. I don't know. That might be a great one for your local representative to carry the water on. I mean,
But that's what I was wondering. Maybe some of those things was just kind of lumped in, and maybe some of it should be relooked at some point. I don't know, but
well, laws are often tweaked and changed, and if there's enough people that are trying to build small businesses in people's districts that raise their hands and say, boy, this doesn't make a lot of biological sense, right? You're saying, Russ, this isn't a scary thing. This is why does this kick us into a whole different license? This seems like a challenge or a roadblock that's not necessary. But that would have to come through legislature.
Right. Okay. That's just, and that might be where it is. It was just lumped in. I can see how that can happen. So.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Or just need to be clarified. Maybe those exemptions, those things can be clarified, but that'd be a revision of the food code, if you will. And usually takes a little more time than you think. Let's say.
Well, yeah, if you open it up, they'll probably trigger something else. Like,
well, that's right. See there. I know, Russ. Yeah. Yeah. Understand. Recognize the frustration in that. That's just I don't see how it creates that big of a food issue, a food safety issue.
I mean, it could be something related to like the ethos behind the original intent of like what it was supposed to be designed for. Like, why was this thing created, product of the farm? Maybe it was all really for like consumers, right? To understand like, oh, there's like a certain trust factor of like, oh, I know everything that is coming in this product came from this one spot. And they're just trying to like emphasize those elements. I could be way off base, but I don't know.
No, it's good food for thought. All those could be reasons or others. So, okay, that sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks all. Or others hanging around. We got questions. This follow up.
This is not quite to food safety licensing, but
Yeah.
other kind of farm licensing that I'm coming up with. When it comes to the scale or the way you measure your portions, let's say for lettuce or other things that scale, I know you should have one that's for trade use, and then the level of certification going to the Department of Commerce and getting that scale certified or having them come in and certify it. I'm just wondering where we would be as farmers, because I know it's different for grocery stores and other establishments, but there's really no information on their site dealing to the farm end or like the before it goes out to those products or places. So I was wondering if you had any information on that.
Well, Q, are you selling in a farmer's market situation? Are you?
It would be farmers markets or CSA or maybe to groceries or restaurants. So those situations.
Yeah, I've been at it as well, and plenty of people say in a farmer's market weighing situation, what have you, they're not using a certified scale, right? You're just sitting there and you're like, it's like the trust between you and that person in front of you. And 90% of the time people are, in terms of doing the transaction, right? There's a transaction cost of waiting, right? You want to move somebody through a line, say in a farmer's market situation. Most people are rounding up, rounding down in order anyways, right? So I wouldn't sweat a certified scale, especially in a farmer's market situation or in a packing situation, say for CSA.
Okay.
And often even in a wholesale situation, a lot of the standards aren't necessarily about a very hard and fast weight amount as much as kind of an industry standard around packaging, right? So if you're saying, hey, I'm going to sell you a 40-pound case of cabbage, right? As a grocery store, we've received, my wife, I'm too involved in the grocery store, right? But in a grocery situation, you might get a case that's weighing 38.5 and another one's 41.3. It's a 40-pound case of cabbage. And so it doesn't get that exact. I think the primary reason those things are certified in a grocery situation is they go down to like the 100, they go down to fractions of an ounce. So you can imagine in a grocery store on a scale, people are going to come up with bulk herbs that are going to weigh 0.02 pounds or 0.003 pounds or something like this. And so it really needs to be exact and it really needs to be certified. And people want some assurance that that is as exact as it can be. Whereas a lot of what we're doing for produce isn't as exacting. I guess that'd be my take and what I've seen with produce people, but has any other produce person here had a different experience? That can definitely happen. Yeah, so I guess I wouldn't sweat it. There is an office called Minnesota Weights and Measures.
Yep. And I had called them and tried to figure that out too. And they said like I might need to be able to get it like certified from them even. So it's like even with them, it's a gray area with where farmers markets and these farmers selling to wholesale is. So I don't know if there's some more communication with them and you guys back and forth with them to figure out where we actually stand with that. Because I know it might become more of a hassle if we have to, or how it comes up if someone were to come back saying you didn't sell me the right amount potentially. So, but I'll probably just get just one that's basic certified from the federal one, because those are all you can buy in commercially, not much more than a normal scale. So, but I won't get the certification from them.
I wouldn't do it. I would just move on. If there's an issue, deal with it and then engage Weights and Measures. I guess I would take it. So I wouldn't make that be much of a roadblock. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yep. All right, that's fun. Hey, new issue. We got another one. I felt like I handled that one, Akio.
It was a different one, but it was a good answer. So
okay.
I think you did great, Ryan.
Right.
I find that my wholesale customers are a lot less exacting than my farmers market customers. Because maybe it's the small town, I don't know, but it's like they just trust me. And the thing with local farmers or these relationships that we're building is like we're always going to over deliver. And I think my customers sense that eagerness. And like, for example, the Food Hub just bought, is Gina still on here? We just bought some of Gina's, no, she's gone, hydroponic romaine lettuce. And I wanted her to weigh everything after she cut it and let me know so that I made sure the invoice was right. And she said, well, charge them for, 25 ounces. It was more like 30, but like we're always going to under promise and over deliver. We're always going to like make that package just a little bit heavier. And so that's been my experience, but I also am in more of a unique place where we're a really small town and we've been building relationships for like 5 years here for this wholesale stuff. So that's a really important question about the scales, but it just hasn't been an issue for me. So hopefully that experience will help you make some decisions.
Yeah, I like that point about trust and relationship. Personally, and this is my own take in terms of how to merchandise well, I'm 100% behind. If it can be made in each, make it in each, especially in a retail situation. I see sometimes vendors futzing around with scales, and you get good at it after a while, but frankly, I don't sell tomatoes by the pound. I sell tomatoes by the quart. It's way quicker. And I think there's something to be said about the customer visualizing what they're purchasing. There are 5 tomatoes in a quart pulp tray. Oh, that costs $5 or that costs $4. Okay, that's worth $4. Whereas you get into this thing where it's like, I don't know. How much is 2 pounds of tomatoes? And it gums up the system. And then it you know, it kind of messes. You get this line, and then this one lady's annoyed. And it's like, why annoy all these people? Just make it quick. Like, yeah, that's $5. Okay, $5. Here you go. Do you want to keep the pulp tray or not? Okay, I'll put it in the bag. Here you go. I mean, you can move it, you know, and I think that's sort of decreasing the transaction cost. That's me with my customer service hat on. If you can do
And
it by each, it's better. I
And
think.
that's the hard part where I'm at with that, because I'll be doing more microgreens, lettuce, and herbs. So
Sure.
like I'll be in the area where you can't quite define each, because if it was each with especially microgreens with some of the smaller ones, there'd be hundreds of them in there. So it's like I have to kind of go that volume or weight metric for them.
Sure.
So
Well, I think it's worth thinking about, Keo. I mean, I know there's a lot of like nice theater, right, where you can do a fresh cut microgreen, right?
Yep.
And people are cool with that, because there's, again, it's part of the theater of the farmer's market.
Yep.
It's sort of some fun in that. Well, I'll take a little of this. It's like getting candy at a candy store. I'll take a little bit of and get this mixed bag. But I do think there's still an opportunity. If you had a pre-weigh situation, if you had a nice package, I'm certainly seeing microgreens sold in a nicer cellophane with a nice label. So there's also a merchandising element to that as well. So it can kind of go both ways. And yeah, your accuracy of your scales certainly more important in a microgreen situation and a cabbage situation, no doubt.
And that's what the food safety side about that too, is that depending on the farmer's market, if they want me to do it or not with having it prepackaged and refrigerated, bringing it in, or allowing fresh cuts and then weighing, it really depends on the market or how they want to do it is the biggest thing.
Sure.
But it also, if I can do the cutting there potentially with volume, it might be easier on me not having to have refrigeration and coolers, because I can just have the live plants, don't have to be cooled like that. And it's just much easier. So a lot of considerations depending on where I'm going.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I did on my farm with microgreens is I found a container that I can grow them in, that I sell the customer the entire container that they harvest at home. Then I cut out all the harvesting and sanitation issues at the market, and makes life a whole lot quicker, like Ryan was talking.
Yeah, it's great, Dan. Yeah, sometimes like I have these smaller trays that I use for wheatgrass. I could see something like that, right? These, I don't know, 4-inch by 4-inch wheatgrass trays. I just take the darn thing. Yeah. Or bring it back. You're charging someone now for a tray. It's just
I use paper pulp trays that people can use, and then they are compostable.
Yeah, even better. Yeah, very good. All right. What else we got?
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
See you
thanks,
later.
Dan. See ya.